Good afternoon and welcome to Piarco International Airport on the island of Trinidad. We're in the Caribbean Airlines CRJ700 today for a flight up to VC Bird Airport on the island of Antigua.
Disagree.
So let's get started here. I'll try to get us off the ground relatively quickly here. Let's go aircraft. Ready for taxi. Fire it up. And I will learn the startup procedure at some point, but it's not like starting a Cessna or the other planes that I fly, the Islander. It's actually quite a bit more complicated. And so you can see we've got 52 passengers today. We've got some cargo. The amount of fuel we've got just under 10,000 pounds. Alright, now let's get over here to the flight computer and get going here. Copy that, go back here, insert. That tells the inertial reference system exactly where we are to the degree. Right, I mean, you know exactly where we are. So that it can have a very accurate picture of where we are as we're flying. Just type in the takeoff airport and the destination airport right there. Copy it into the route. It'll fill out all this information for you. Because we've got that pre-loaded. Now departure is runway 10. Now we want to go to departure arrival index. Look at the arrival into VC Bird. We want to go runway RNAV runway 7. Transition Mali. Execute that. Flight plan page looking good. Our alternate is St. Croix. Let's go to the legs page. Let's get rid of this discontinuity. And then we also need to get rid of that because that would be a double Emali. We don't want a double Emali in our flight plan. We just want one in our flight plan, so that's set. Alright. That we've got perf init page. For whatever reason it didn't copy this stuff from the iPad, but we'll do that again in a second. Cruising altitude today's flight level 230. If we do have to go to our alternate, flight level would be flight level 10, as they say down here in the US. That would be 10,000. Let's do this again. Now it should copy all the weight and all that fun business into the perf init page for us, which it has done here. VNAV setup 290 and 74 is our target airspeed for climb. Transition altitude is 4,100 feet. It's the altitude that we transition from the local altimeter setting to the standard altimeter setting. I don't know why they do it at 4,100 feet. I don't know why they do it at all different airspeeds or altitudes. It would make a lot of sense just to have it at one flight level like it is in other parts of the world, but sieste la vie. And then in BC Bird, it's flight level, what they call flight level 4000. Flight level 40. Alright, that is set. VNAV setup is set. We don't need anything there. Let me just make sure here that I'm not forgetting anything. This. Last I checked, actually it should be right here. Deviation is plus 14, tailwind 5 knots. Perfect. Perf in it. Plus 14. Just does a lot of performance calculations for us. And then P5. Don't ask me why it's plus 5 or plus 14 here and P5 for plus 5 here. I don't know the answer to that question. It's the way it is. Some things are just the way they are. Alright, that's set. That's set. VNAV is set. Do the fix in route. Descent info, Amali at 2,500 feet or above. Set up our MFDs. I'm getting pretty snappy with this. That's our co-pilot window. Alright. Let's put in our ATC squawk code. Let's go with 2303 today. Okay. Alright. I think we're pretty darn ready, I would say. Let me see what the local altimeter setting is. Piarco weather 1013, which also happens to be standard altimeter setting. So we're good. Alright, so checklist. Clear to start. All that stuff is good. After start checklist, generators. Nice. Nose steering is armed. All this stuff is looking good. Probes are on. I want to turn the cabin temperature down a little bit, make it a little bit more comfortable for my passengers. Taxi checklist. Slats and flaps. Let's set slats for takeoff, or flaps for takeoff rather. We want 8 degrees. Flight controls. Alright, flight controls are looking good. Thrust reversers are armed, I know that. Flight instruments checked, 1013. I want to set 15,000 as our initial altitude. That's good. The yaw dampeners, that thing is always asking to be reset. Don't know why. I'm going to gauge the brakes, release the parking brake. Let's call for pushback here. Alright, brake temperatures are good. All of our trims are good. These are all green. Plenty of fuel. We have the takeoff configuration check is okay. The thrust reversers are armed. Got a nice push from this gentleman here. And the takeoff, straight ahead 6 nautical miles to Dannon, and then a left turn to Emkist, 187 nautical miles away. Just want to dial this in a little bit closer for the initial portion of the flight. Oh, look at that, KLM. I'm going to be getting sort of towards dusk as we get towards Antigua. Okay, taxi is good. The taxi check. Alright, I think this is a good enough pushback. Wait for him to back away. Taxi light is on. Strobes are on. Hydraulics are on. Everything's looking good. Goose that right throttle to get us turning here. So what do you always want to do? Always want to check your brakes. Brakes are working. No matter what airplane you're flying, as soon as that airplane gets rolling under its own power, you want to check the brakes. The one thing you don't want is to find out too late in the game that you don't have any brakes. Alright, lights and strobes. Put the landing lights on right before we take off. Fuel flow is on manual override. Flight attendants advised. Transponder and CAS, TCAS are set. Let's see, the radar trains display we don't need. The CAS is looking good. That's up here. It would give us any sort of warnings about things that we might have forgotten or hadn't done properly. But we are a competent flight crew. 122.8 in the frequency. And that is courtesy of Aerosoft Simple Traffic. And it's simple. You pay your $14, I think it was. And then you download it and install it into Flight Simulator. It takes a couple clicks. And then the next time you fly, instead of having, you know, orange colored airplanes that are just don't mean anything, you get KLM. Right across the way there, you can see that yellow plane, that's DHL. Next to that, straight across from us right there is, what are they called again? Amerijet. It's another cargo company that flies around, flies out of South Florida, flies around the Caribbean quite a bit. But instead of getting like generic aircraft everywhere, you get actual aircraft, which is really pretty cool. Starting to see an airplane coming in from the west. He's not going to be here before we get out of here. Alright, flaps are set. Initial altitude is set. Cast looks good. I'm going to turn on my landing lights. Always want your landing lights on under 10,000 feet. The other thing you want to do is hit the toggle button and you'll get these two flashing TOTOs. And that means you are ready for takeoff. You've got everything set. So we'll get the climb checklist ready. And again, I don't see anybody that's going to be a conflict on the as far as traffic goes. So let's get out of here. Piarco traffic, Caribbean 264 taking runway 10 for departure to the north. Piarco. I don't see anybody in. I don't see anybody on final. I don't see anybody on the runway in that direction. Looking clear in that direction.
Approaching runway 10.
So I'll keep an eye down there just in case you missed something.
Entered runway 10. 8,100 feet remaining.
See that Amerijet right there? It's got the blue tail. Alright, the runway number checks with the heading indicator for runway 10. We are aligned. There's the climb power. There's toga power, and you see the toga indication right here. That's takeoff, go around power, which is what we want. Engine instruments all look good. Airspeed is alive, 80 knots. Cross-checked. Make sure those two airspeed indicators agree. 128 is V1 and rotate. Pull the nose up, positive rate of climb, put the gear up. And this is such a pretty, look at like the fields, and it's just such a pretty island, and just wonderfully depicted in Microsoft Flight Simulator. I think it's so cool. All right, power back to climb power. One notch of flaps up there. I was really impressed flying in here the other day. Put up that second notch of flaps. I was really impressed with the landscape. It's just gorgeous. I'm gonna hand fly this initial part.
Climbing through transition altitude.
And let's see if we can get this to set. No, it won't set. So, oh well. Just doing a little hand flying here. This is not like a complicated departure procedure by any stretch of the imagination. So I figure me as well actually fly it. There's the airport. That cloud level's at about, I don't know, 4,500 feet, maybe 5,000. Alright, so we'll go nav mode, speed mode, autopilot. And we're going to set the speed here to 250. How beautiful is that, huh? Nice puffy clouds. Alright, climb checklist. I already turned off the set the fuel flow to auto. Bleeds, excuse me, I have a bit of a kind of a scratchy throat. Thrust reverser is off. Alright, CAS checked. I can turn off the seatbelt sign now. Let the good folks in the back walk around. try again to set this barometer here. The Microsoft Flight Simulator has changed the way you interact with the buttons. I presume they did that to make it easier for Xbox, but it's really kind of a pain for PC users. What I want to do is just be able to hit that button, which sets the barometer to the standard setting of QNH 1013, and this will blink, reminding me to do it, and it won't stop blinking until, even if I set it manually, the number actually didn't change. It's 1013. That's what it was on the ground. Nonetheless, it will blink even if you don't have to change the number. Let's put our altitude here up to our cruise altitude of flight level 23. We can also,
ladies and gentlemen, we are now serving sandwiches.
Put our speed up to 290 because we're above 10,000 feet. And there goes the coast of Trinidad. Up here on our right, you're going to see Tobago. And that, in the distance there, what you see is a peninsula belonging to Venezuela. So, climb checklist complete. $163 nautical miles from MKIS. Alright, we're climbing through 17,000. That's Tobago over there. We can turn our landing lights off, because we don't need them. I don't know what I did with my armrest. Beautiful sight, huh? I've often thought if I had a job like this as a pilot, where I got to fly somewhere that I really, really enjoyed, and I absolutely love flying in the Caribbean, would I give up that job that I loved for a quote-unquote better job? $1,000 to go. You know, would I give up a job, like if I was actually flying for Caribbean Airlines? I mean, they don't even fly this airplane, but they do fly this route. Start backing off the power here. 75% N1 is going to be where we're going to want to go. would I give up a job I really liked, like flying here, for flying around, like the US, for example, in a job that I found much less interesting but paid better and was a more prestigious job? I think I would just stay in the Caribbean. Not likely a decision I'm going to have to face anytime soon. But I will say, that Microsoft Flight Simulator has made flight simulation in the Caribbean, it's just taken it to a whole new level, I think. In Prepared, which I used to fly before I got into Microsoft Flight Simulator, I didn't really use it all that much because the Caribbean has always been a pretty neglected part of the world as far as flight simulation goes. That's Grenada up there. And like the islands were all kind of blocky, and you know, the vegetation wasn't that interesting. The water, I mean, you can see those like swirls on the water that are just so realistic. I mean, that's what the water looks like, you know, at altitudes like this. And all of this that we're looking at right now is just straight out of the box from Microsoft Flight Simulator. It's just amazing. I think like a lot of people, I've had kind of a love-hate relationship with it. Since it started, it's had some problems. There's no question about that. But it's also just the potential. I mean, I think even if nothing changed from what it is right now, I think I'd be pretty happy flying this airplane in this scenery, you know, in perpetuity. I don't think I would get bored of it. I mean, there's nothing I really look at and think, gee, that needs to be better. And fortunately, I mean, there's things that do need to be better in the sim for sure. But a lot of it has to do with like kind of the flight planning and the ATC and stuff like that, which with this airplane and this flight management system, I mean, I do all the flight, you know, I do all the flight planning before I start the simulator. I use SimBrief, and you know, set up the flight, and then very realistically, you know, you come in here like you would in a real flight crew, and you just type in your departure TTPP and your destination TAPA, click it there, and it fills in all this information for you. And that's realistic. That's what the actual flight the actual flight management system does in the real airplane. And the other interesting thing, there's like some kind of hitches and some things that don't really work the way you'd expect them to in here, or quirks with the autopilot, how it follows certain approaches, and they actually match the glitches in the real airplane. So I've seen people ask, like, you know, what's up with this and that, you know, it doesn't work right in the simulator, and actual CRJ pilots will respond and say, well, guess what, it doesn't work right in the airplane either. Which, I mean, that's, you know, talk about realistic. But alright, so we're good on airspeed, good on altitude. Take a look through our systems here. You can go through by pressing the step button. Goes through everything here. It's our cabin pressure. Cabin altitude is about 2,500 feet. Still increasing right now to match as we've finished our climb. Cockpit temperature is 21 degrees. Cabin air is 21 degrees. Let's hit the step button again. All we're doing, hitting the step button, it goes through all these for you. You just don't have to hit each individual one. You just keep hitting step and it goes through it all. Hydraulic system, 3,000 pounds PSI on each. That's what we're looking for. These are all the different systems that each hydraulic system operates. Step button, AC electrical, APU and ground generator are not working, which we wouldn't expect them to be. Gen 1, Gen 2, all set. DC electrical, everything in the green. I would be lying to you if I tried to say I had any idea what any of it means, but it's all green, so let's keep on trucking. Flight, fuel, we used 1,675 pounds of fuel so far. We've got 8,180 pounds on board on either side. I don't know why it's giving me a temperature over here and not over here. These are all the flight controls. Everything is green. That means everything's working. These are the trims. We've got 2.5 degrees of nose down trim. All the trims are green. Anti-ice system is good. We're not using it, but the system is good. Needed to. All the doors are closed. This is excellent news at flight level 230. And then that just matches this. That's the primary page. And then you hit step again, brings you to that page. No smoking sign is on. APU door is closed. Again, your aileron, rudder, and stabilator trim, all good. Oxygen, cabin temperature, cabin altitude, descent rate, pressure, landing level. Okay. Meanwhile, as I'm running my mouth, we fly past Grenada. There's an excellent rum from Grenada called Six Saints. If you like rum and you see Six Saints, buy it. It is cheap. It is, I think it's like 16 bucks. Maybe it's $16.99, I forget. But it's inexpensive and it's just delicious. It's got a little color to it, like a little golden color to it. It's just really, really good. As a matter of fact, when this flight's over, I'm gonna have some. These are the Grenadine Islands. I think this is Cunan, Union Island, and Mystique, I think, but don't quote me on that. So this one right here that we're just going over is Caribou. Then, yeah, so I was dead wrong. This is Union Island right here. Then next is Cunan. right here. And then I think that is Mystique. Or no, Mystique is out here. And then up there is St. Vincent. So that's St. Vincent, these are the Grenadines. And say goodbye to Grenada. And this is what I would do if I was a pilot. I mean, I am a pilot, but I'm not a pilot for Caribbean Airlines. Actually, part of the reason why I embarked on this journey of, because I've never flown jets in flight simulators, because to me it never made any sense. All you were doing, I mean, it makes sense if kind of makes sense if you're not a pilot and you're not really interested in learning all the physics and the mechanics and, you know, all that stuff about flying. But that's really all I was interested in. Besides, I mean, I'm, you know, obviously love flying around the Caribbean just to see all the cool scenery. But mainly, you know, I always flew, you know, Cherokees, the Cessna 152. Taught myself how to fly the Islander, even though I've since discovered that I'm not. Well, actually, I knew I'm not 100% accurate in how I fly it. And I'm going to come back to the Islander pretty soon and really try to dial in my flying with that airplane and really get it to a point where I'm flying it correctly. Should be a KLM flight over here somewhere. Too far away to see. But anyway, I always wanted to use the simulator to practice, you know, things that I do in the real airplane. And this might sound kind of funny, but the reason why about 2 weeks ago that I decided to buy this airplane and start flying it a little bit was to do exactly this. I wanted to be, you know, in the mid-flight levels looking around at the scenery. And I wanted to see what it looked like from the captain's perspective, from the flight crew's perspective. What it's like looking out the pointy end of a jet while you're flying along. And it hasn't disappointed, and I think I've picked up how to fly this plane relatively quickly. I mean, it's just a superficial knowledge that I have. I certainly don't have, you know, any in-depth systems knowledge, but I mean, to the credit of Aerosoft, they make it so it's easy enough to learn and be able to fly and have fun doing it without having to go completely overboard on learning every little thing. You know, and some people want to do that, and I'd like to continue learning about this plane and learning more and more about it. And I also want to learn more about the Islander. But I think I've figured out how to fly this thing pretty quickly. And I enjoy it. I really enjoy it. There's St. Vincent right there. And one cool thing that's happening in the imaginary world of flight simulation. So I'm flying as Caribbean Airlines Flight 264 from Piarco to BC Bird, Antigua, and there's another plane in my area that's flying in the simulator on VATSIM, who's flying as Caribbean Flight 416 from Barbados, which is kind of over there, to Kingston, Jamaica. And I always like to find like-minded pilots that like to fly on VATSIM. So it would be kind of cool. There's a decent chance that he's going to cross my path up here a little bit, or at least be close enough where I can see him, where we can see another plane. So for anybody who doesn't know what VATSIM is virtual air traffic simulation. And so rather than using the built-in air traffic control system in the simulator, which is this right here, which is pretty poor, you log onto a network, and there may be in-route controllers, there may be approach and departure controllers, that are actual people, and tower controllers, and they give you live air traffic service for free. And if there isn't anybody there to provide ATC services, what you do is you monitor and broadcast on 122.8, which is really what you would do in the real world if there's no controller. I mean, in the real world there would be a controller here, but it's really pretty great. And I mean, I talk about being on VATSIM on basically all of my flights, and in some of them you've seen and heard other air traffic controllers, and they just do a phenomenal job. The guys here in the Caribbean just do an amazing job. They know the local procedures for the different airports, there's a lot of local lingo and visual approaches that they use and reporting points that they use that if you weren't from here, you wouldn't know them necessarily. And I've spent so much time flying around here that I know a lot of it. I certainly don't know all of it, and I'm continuing to learn because I'm just interested in this stuff. So I like to make it as realistic as possible. So anyway, VATSIM, the virtual air traffic guys down here are phenomenal. Yeah, the sun's starting to descend, isn't it? gonna put in. See, we're only 27. It's only 27 minutes out. I should probably stop yapping and start. Start doing what I need to do. So, reference point. What reference point am I looking for? I'm looking for Imali. I'm putting in a reminder effectively. I mean, not allowed. I'm fairly certain it is allowed. What I'm trying to do is put in a reminder for my top of descent. There it is, yeah. And let's see, 23 minus 2 is 21 times 4 is 84. Distance crossing, and you can see we've just created that circle right there. And all that circle is a reminder for me that my top of descent is approaching. So I don't think we're going to see what they refer to in the aviation world as company traffic. Company traffic, if you ever hear somebody say follow company traffic on a 3-mile final or whatever else, company traffic is another aircraft that's from your company, from the same company that you're operating for. They call it company traffic. So we need to get thinking about our approach. 23 minutes to Imali. So let's bring up the chart. And I have to log in again. Which is kind of annoying. I have to log in every single flight, and I don't quite know why. So, there's our flight. Well, the flight's going to come up here in a second. So there's our flight. That's where we are. Don't need that pinned anymore. So let's get the RNAV 07 approach into VC Bird. Let's go full page here. And yeah, so our compatriot is behind us now. This is Martinique that we're coming up on. Right over here. Right there is St. Lucia, but it's kind of under the clouds. Can't really see it. Martinique, you can see better. Alright, so here's what we're going to do. Let's brief this approach. ATIS is 132.4. Let's get the ATIS right now. Wind is 090 to 11 knots. So variable between 040 and 160. So basically an east wind that's variable at about 11 knots. Good visibility, greater than 6 statute miles. Clouds, few at 1800 AGL. Temperature 27, dew point 21, altimeter 1016. I'll write that down. Got that. Okay. I'm getting the weather on my iPad and trying not to cough. All right. So, approach, tower, ground frequencies. Alright, it's an RNAV approach, final approach course 013. Glide slope intercept is Bopar at 2000 feet. MDA is 630. There is no, it's an LNAV approach, which means lateral navigation. It's a non-precision approach, so there's not going to be anything different for different categories of aircraft. There's Martinique right there. So one thing we need to do is set the MDA. So we come down here. Set that to MDA, and then we say here, we want to set our MDA. The MDA is 630 feet. And what this does, it's just going to give us a reminder on the approach when we hit 630 feet, hey, this is your MDA. Alright, so the MDA is set. Alright, now the airport elevation is 60 feet. I call that effectively sea level 0. I'm gonna dial. Gonna dial this range back here. On my display to 80 miles, now that the top of descent is going to be there in a second. Alright, so airport elevation is effectively 0. Missed approach, climb to 2500, direct LIDOC. So there's the runway, straight ahead to 2500 feet to LIDOC, then direct Emusu, and then hold. I don't know which hold or which entry the flight computer would give me. I would do a teardrop entry here. I think teardrop is the easiest. Hold entry, and to do a teardrop, all you do is the outbound heading, which is 073. Outbound heading minus 30 degrees, so 043, about like that. It's a 4 nautical mile hold, so you go on a heading of 043 to 4 nautical miles from IMSU, and then you just make a standard rate right hand turn around to an inbound heading of 153. Of course, if it was a non-standard holding pattern, which would be left-hand turns, you would do outbound plus 30, because this would be flipped over onto this side, cross it, go that way. So holding patterns are actually pretty easy once you get a hang of them. So let's see here. I can already put my next altitude in. The one thing you always want to do once you get into the descent and approach phase in this airplane, you always want to put in the next altitude you need. It's not going to change the altitude based on what I've just done. I just put the altitude down to 2,500 feet, which is, let's see, VNAV. $2,500 feet at Imali. You can see that here. So our next altitude is 2,500 feet. I mean, granted the fact that we're not getting step down altitudes from ATC. So you always want to have your next altitude set so that you can start in vertical speed mode and just descend, and then it'll go automatically into alt capture mode and capture that altitude once it gets there. Alright, transition level, flight level 40, which we've already got. GNS required, DME not authorized. That's kind of some esoteric nonsense that we don't need to really be concerned about. Dominica is coming up here. So, let's see. High terrain north and south of the aerodrome. Turbulence on approach with east or southeast wind. We've got an east wind today. So we should expect some turbulence on the approach. Unless ATC clearance is obtained for RNAV GNS as procedure, the navigation and position reporting of all aircraft shall be conducted with reference to conventional ground-based navigation aids. And what that is telling you is effectively they want to know where you are based on your relative position from VORs. And there is it's kind of silly to put that on an RNAV approach plate, because RNAV approach plates, by their very definition, don't have VORs on them. There's a number of VOR approaches into VC Bird, and if I was flying any of them, I would have the VOR approach plate up, and I would be able to navigate to, or I'd be able to tell them quite easily, what navigation or where I am relative to that VOR. Since they're asking for it, the VOR is, let's see, 114.5 is the
Destination ATIS is 132.
is the VOR. What did I just say? I think it's 114.5. Yep. 114.5, so we'll be realistic and we'll let's go to the radios page. 114.5. Put that in the nav1 box. We want that on manual, otherwise it would automatic. If it's on auto for nav1, it's going to switch the nav1 frequency to whatever nav frequency is closest. We don't want that. I know which one I want. The one I want is 114.5. Even though I don't plan on using it. What else are we going to do here? Alright, so crossing Mali at 2,500 feet, inbound heading 073 down to 2,000 to Beauport. Beauport, glide slope intercept. The descent angle is 3 degrees, which is a standard descent rate. The standard glide slope angle. So we know it's not going to be like a steep approach. That's Dominica down there. So we know it's not going to be a steep approach. What else do we need? Missed approach point is at the runway threshold. You can see that here. It's also written here. Excuse me for clearing my throat and your ears. We've got runway end identifier lights. We've got a high intensity approach light system, which are these, they call it the rabbit, which is those lights that lead up to the runway. We've also got a PAPI, which is a precision approach path indicator, which is those 4 lights to the left of the runway. What you want to see is 2 red, 2 white. That's when you know that you are on glide path. We ain't doing circle to land. start to see Guadalupe coming up right here. Alright, so, and then there's the missed approach again, climb to 2500, direct LiDoc. Alright, so ground speed is going to be right between these two. It's not going to be 120, it's not going to be 140, it's going to be 130. So, well, actually, it might be 140. It's about 750 feet a minute. 700 feet a minute is what we're going to use. And speaking of which, let's take a look at the descent checklist. Landing level is set. Fuel, plenty of it. I'm going to bring this range in here one more. TCAS is set. Radar, we don't need to worry about. Let's check the CAS. All good. Landing data. Let's get the fuel value. So we click that and it just automatically reads the fuel value in the airplane, 6,559 pounds, and then that gives us a, you know, adjusts all your weights and your landing weights, and then the computer uses that to calculate your landing speed. So those are good. So we're going to set those. VREF is 132, so I can fly it at, say, 137. If we have to go around, looking toga power and pitch for 193. That's probably not going to happen. Let's hope so in any event. Or let's hope not in any event. Alright, so there's Guadalupe. Getting towards our top of descent, this is the estimate that I put in. I like to start my top of descent a little, I like to start my descent a little earlier. That's where the computer decided it was going to be. So I like to start it a little early. And the reason for that is I want to get down and leveled off and get my airspeed and everything organized before I start the actual approach. Alright, now let's go over to the VNAV page. I've hit where I, you know, that's my little airplane symbol. This is 84 miles from Amali. You can see it right there. VNAV page, over to page 3, get the descent info. So I would need 1,800 feet a minute to descend to that. So we'll go to vertical speed. Let's go to 2,000 a minute. Pull the power back because we're descending, we don't want to overspeed. And get a nice view here of Guadalupe. We might get a really nice sunset landing into Antigua. And get that, like, get all those pink clouds that you get in the Caribbean at night, or in the evening. Alright, we are on FMS 1, which is what we want. We're on white needles. This is an RNAV approach, so we want white needles. Approach is briefed. Before landing checklist, flight attendants advised, passenger sign on, thrust reversers armed, landing gear and flaps. I'm going to arm the thrust reversers right now, even though I really should probably wait a little bit. The reason I do it a little earlier is because I may not read that checklist again before we land, and I don't want to forget. That's one of those things you don't want to forget. I'm a big checklist guy. Some pilots just kind of wing it. I am not one of those pilots. I use checklists religiously. And I check things 18 times before I, before I do them. I'll go over the approach multiple times. And the other thing that people think is kind of weird, maybe, I call out everything verbally. Always calling things out verbally. In other words, talking to myself. I talk to myself all the time when I'm flying, out loud, because I don't know, it's just the way I learned, and it works for me. So there's Guadalupe. Alright, descending through 16,500, airspeed is a little bit high, not too bad. Bring that power back just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit. So, as I was saying, I do things over, I go through things over and over again before I do them. Once I hit 2,500 feet and I'm leveled off, airspeed is going to be 210. And then I'm going to set the altitude hold for 2,000. Cross Imali. Cross Imali at 2,500. Go to vertical speed mode, down 1,000 feet a minute, down to 2,000 feet. It's only going to be 500 feet that we're going to have to lose. It'll be pretty quick. Once we're level at 2,000 feet, once we get altitude capture at 2,000 feet, I will then go to a setting of 2,500 on the altitude pre-select. And once we cross Beauport, I'm going to go into vertical speed mode down at 700 feet per minute. It's going to be approximately the glide slope we're going to need, or the descent rate we're going to need. And the reason why, once I get settled at 2,000 feet, between Imali and Beauport, that I reset the altitude pre-select, which is this right here, to 2,500 feet, because if I don't do that and I get to Beauport and try to descend in vertical speed mode, the airplane is going to capture again at 2,000 feet, and it's not going to let me descend. And ask me how I learned that. But I got that tip from an actual CRJ pilot, which was pretty cool. All right, so airspeed is perfect. Getting down to 10,000 feet, so let's turn our landing lights on. BC Bird weather, one last check, 1017 is now the altimeter. And yeah, we need to bring back the power a little bit more and bring the nose up to slow down, because we can't be, let's bring it back to idle here, because we can't be over 250 knots under 10,000 feet. Let's reset the speed here to 250. I dial that number in right there mainly as a reminder to myself. It's not really... Alright. Okay. So I'll come back in with some power now that we've got to the airspeed that we want.
Transition altitude. Nearest altimeter, 1017.
Okay. Alright, 1017. Apparently we are transitioning in the airspace just south of... See, that's the thing too, is it's not the transition altitude around VC Bird is not consistent with the transition altitudes of other areas that are nearby, right? Because I just got a transition altitude notification at, you know, 8,000 feet. And I'm sure ForeFlight is right. That's the program I'm using. I have no doubt that they're correct. So 20 miles from here, the transition altitude is 4,000 feet, but right here, the transition altitude is different. It's 8,000 feet. And how much sense does that make? The answer is none. And it's really, you know, I don't know, it just doesn't make any sense. And in the States, and this isn't like, oh, we're cooler than you guys are thing, but in the States, transition altitude is always 18,000 feet. It's always 18,000 feet. It's always the same thing. You can see VC Bird up there, or, well, you can see Antigua up there anyway. You know, it's always the same thing. You don't have to worry about what the transition altitude, what the local transition altitude is, because there's no such thing. And I'm the most fidgety pilot in the world, by the way. I've got to get my seat like just right. And I do this in actual airplanes too. Alright, 6,000 descending 2,500. And we are going to get a really cool evening descent here. Alright. Start slowing the airplane down. Alright, Amali at or above 2,500. Once we hit 2,500, we gotta reset the altitude down to, the altitude pre-select down to 2,000. I'm gonna dial in 210 on the speed right now, which is our minimum clean airspeed. That's basically just a reminder. 5,000 for 2,500. Airspeed is now coming down. One last check here on VATScope, make sure there's nobody, you know, if we have a controller or some other traffic. far are we from Mali? 15 nautical miles. VC Bird traffic, Caribbean 264, 15 miles south of Mali, inbound on the RNAV 07, VC Bird. Okay, and we're good. Nobody there to bother us. Alright, so airspeed is coming down. Altitude is coming down. I progressively bring this into a closer and closer range as we get there. Pretty soon we're going to get the 1,000 to go notification. Getting in the clouds now a little bit. And there we go, 1,000 to go. Alright, and we're going to want to put in some power as you start to level off. I'm going to put in first degree of flaps. We are now 7 miles from Mali. Altitude capture. Once it captures, power up to about 55. Alright, let's put on the...
We are about to land. Please notice the cabin lights have been turned off, as this is a normal procedure for a nighttime landing.
210, I'm going to bring the altitude down to 2,000. And it's, again, it's not going to descend right now because it's set at the altitude it wants to be at. So what I've done is I've just set in the next altitude. There's 8 degrees of flaps. We can come down to 180 knots now. Okay. VC Bird traffic, Caribbean 264 is 3 miles from Mali, inbound on the RNAV 07, VC Bird. Alright. Power back just a little bit. Okay. Passenger science, thrust reversers, landing gear, slats, flaps. Thrust reversers are set. Alright, airspeed is coming down. Alright, 20 degrees of flaps. Next airspeed we want is 160. And now we want vertical speed mode down 1,000 feet a minute. Bring the power back a little bit. VC Bird traffic, Caribbean 264 and Mali inbound on the RNAV 07 VC Bird. And once that captures at 2,000, we're going to set the altitude pre-select back up to 2,500 so it's above us. And we don't want that power to come back too much. Look at this, how beautiful, huh? Alright, 20 degrees of flaps. Come on, give me altitude capture here, baby. It's still an altitude select. Now it's altitude capture. Now we can put it up to 2,500, which is for the missed approach if we need to do that. And Bopar is a 5-mile final. So we are 1 mile from Bopar. I'm going to put flaps and gear down. And once we cross that, I'm going... No. Why did it do that? It pitched up for some reason. I did not ask it to pitch up. We're just above glide slope. We're okay. Picking up speed because the nose is now pointed down, so that's good. BC Bird traffic, Caribbean 264, 3-mile final, runway 7. BC Bird. Alright, so speed is good, flaps are set, gear is down. Alright, I'm going to disconnect the autopilot. And then you put that bar right back up, because if you don't, you can't reconnect the autopilot if you want to. I don't anticipate wanting to, but if I have to, I want to be able to. Okay. Coming back over here to get on center line. Push the nose down and put some nose down trim here. Now there's that turbulence.
Runway 07.
There's that turbulence they mentioned. Alright, vertical speed is good.
1,000.
Definitely got a right crosswind here. Airspeed's good. We're a bit high, which is okay.
500.
Airspeed is good. That's what I'm really looking for. Tad high, not too worried about it.
500.
Just a little bit
400.
more power.
300. 200. 100. 50. 40. 30. 20. 10.
Look at that, straight down center line with that right crosswind. Nose is down. Thrust reverser is armed. Start in with the toe brakes here. And ladies and gentlemen, I am satisfied with that landing. Taxi lights on. Landing lights off. And we will vacate here via Charlie. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Antigua, BC Bird Airport. I gotta say, I'm pretty pleased with that.
Please remain seated until until the
the
aircraft
thing
has
that's
come to a
really,
complete
really
stop.
different, I think the thing that's most different about flying these types of, about flying this airplane versus flying any type of piston airplane is you cannot make big throttle changes on like descent and approach. You just can't. I mean, if you upset the, look at that. VC Bird traffic, Caribbean 264 is clear the runway, VC Bird. If you upset the kind of the glide path and the speed in one of these airplanes, there's just no way you're gonna get it back. There's just no way. And so you really have to be on speed with a power setting that's really darn close to what you need, and just make the most minor adjustments. You start making big adjustments on anything, and you can just forget it in an airplane like this. You're going to be going around. There we go. Let's put on the parking brake here. And let's shut down the engines. And before the passengers start screaming and hollering and yelling for their rights, let's turn that off. So, there it is. And this right here, this gorgeous scenery, is a payware version of VC Bird Airport. I think I may have paid $15 for it. And it's just so cool, you know. At least I think. I mean, look at this. Really not too bad, huh? And so that was a successful flight. I didn't really anticipate landing at the at Dusk, which has turned out to be very, very cool. One of the things I think Microsoft Flight Simulator does really, really well is this. Right, this Dusk setting. And this this livery that I have here for this plane, Caribbean Airlines, the CRJ700, is available on flightsim.to. And this version of the airport is, I'm sure I got it from justflight.com. It's basically where I get everything. And, you know, as you can see, it's certainly worth, you know, whatever I paid for it. It's pretty darn cool, and you see that traffic coming in on final over there. So I hope you guys enjoyed the flight. I certainly did, and talk to you next time.